The events you're about to see are based on real accounts. To protect the identities of those involved, names and details have been changed. My name is Richard Mason. I'm 42 years old and I live in Ohio. I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me about 15 years ago, but to this day, I can't quite explain what happened. If someone had told me something like this, I wouldn't believe it. But unfortunately, I lived through it. I don't know what it was or how it happened, but I feel like something is still following me. And to be honest, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was just any afternoon in 2008. I worked as a computer technician at a local school, one of those old schools with that smell of old wood and quiet hallways. I would sometimes do maintenance on the machines, and that day I was fixing a computer in the computer lab. While I was adjusting the network, I found some drawings scattered across the desk. Children's drawings, you know, the kind you see at schools, with simple shapes and lots of scribbles. But there was something wrong with them. What caught my attention was a figure that appeared in almost all of the drawings. It was a tall silhouette with long arms and a blurred face, almost expressionless. What bothered me the most at first was that this figure seemed to be watching the children in the drawings. There were no clear details, but it was always behind them, as if it was just observing, waiting for something. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, it was just a child's drawing, and you know how kids are, they imagine anything. But when I started looking more into what was going on, I realized this wasn't an isolated thing. I started hearing rumors. Children had been disappearing in the area over the past few years, several of them, and no one knew what was going on. I never believed in these kinds of mass disappearances, but after seeing those drawings, I began to wonder if there was a connection between them. I went to the school's administration and talked to some teachers. They were reluctant, but one of them finally told me something that sent a chill down my spine. They had found other drawings, similar to the ones I had seen in other schools in the region. Drawings with the same figure. Something strange happened after that. None of these children disappeared immediately, but the drawings kept appearing, always the same figure. In some, it was in a forest. In others, it was in a dark corner, just watching. The worst part was that with each new drawing, the figure seemed more real. I knew I had to know more, so one night I decided to investigate. I went to the local library and searched for any information about the disappearances. While I was going through old newspapers and school records, I found something that made my stomach drop. An old case of a girl who disappeared in 1982. It wasn't well known, but the strange thing was that, before she vanished, she had left a drawing very similar to the ones I had seen. The figure was there, watching the girl, in one corner of the paper. I knew something was wrong, but I still couldn't piece together the whole story. That same night, on a whim, I decided to visit the home of one of the missing children. It was a quiet street with old houses, and the atmosphere was heavy. I was already feeling uneasy. I didn't know why. The child's father, a solitary man, let me in, and we started talking about the disappearance. He told me about the drawings his daughter had made before she vanished, and his face tightened when he mentioned a tall figure with a strange appearance that the girl said she saw outside her window at night. The description was exactly the same as the figure I had seen in the school drawings. He didn't seem to believe it was anything serious, but something about the way he spoke, the way he said it, made me feel like there was more to it than he was letting on. I went home that night with my mind racing. I was starting to put the pieces together, but at the same time, I was scared of what I might discover. However, the strangest thing happened after that. During the night, I started having nightmares. It was always the same dream, where I saw a child walking through a dark forest with that tall figure watching from a distance. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something was out there, outside my window, a presence, just watching. This kept happening for weeks. I couldn't tell anymore what was real and what was a dream. Then, one morning, as I passed by the school, I saw something that froze me in place. On the school wall, someone had drawn the same figure, the same bizarre appearance, and it was there, watching the entrance to the school. But what gave me chills was that I recognized the style of the drawing. It was from a child who had recently disappeared. And the worst part, the drawing was fresh, as if it had been made that very night. This didn't make sense. The child had disappeared, but the drawing was there, visible, as if the presence of the figure wanted to be seen. I tried to tell the authorities, but no one believed me. They thought I was becoming paranoid. But then, more children started disappearing, and the drawings kept appearing in different places with the same figure watching. I even saw other adults talking about these drawings, but no one paid attention to them. They were more focused on the disappearances, without realizing that maybe there was something more to it, something they couldn't see, as if that figure was waiting, always watching. I went to the police again, trying to find any pattern, but they were getting more and more distant. I searched the internet, on local news websites, and found some vague mentions about what they called the Observer. It was an unconfirmed theory, but it spoke about a presence that was behind the disappearances. No one knew what it was, but many said it was linked to the drawings. But no one except me seemed to really see the connection. In the end, the disappearances stopped as suddenly as they had started. No one could explain why. The investigations continued, but they couldn't find any plausible explanation for everything that happened. The children, the drawings, the tall figure, everything stopped. But to this day, whenever I catch myself looking out the window at night, I feel like something is still watching me. I know I'm not crazy. I saw what I saw, and somehow I feel like the story is still not over. My name is Elliot Walker, I'm 19 years old, and I live in a small town called Brooksville, Florida. This happened to a friend of mine, Trevor, about 2 years ago, but I still can't stop thinking about what happened. I don't know if he just disappeared or if something worse happened, but I'll tell you everything I know and what I saw. And I'll start by saying that what happened to me that night has no explanation. Trevor has always been a little weird, you know? But he was my childhood friend, so I was used to him. We spent a lot of time together playing video games or walking around town. But in the last summer, he started acting strange. He began saying he was seeing something, or rather, someone. He couldn't explain it right, but he said he saw a very tall figure near his house. He described it as being thin, with long arms and no face. He even said it looked like But by early July, he started to become obsessed with it. Every day was the same story. He saw the figure near his house. He said it was lurking, always in the distance, but watching him. He refused to leave the house alone, and he even started sleeping with the lights on. It was bizarre. But what bothered me the most was how convinced he was that he was seeing it. He kept talking about how the thing was getting closer, like it was coming nearer and nearer. The worst day was a Thursday night. I was at home, just relaxing, when I got a message from Trevor. He wrote to me saying, "It's here. I don't know how much longer I can stay here." I was shocked. I quickly replied, asking what he was talking about, but I didn't get an answer. I decided to run over to his house. I knew where he lived. It was a quiet street, far from downtown. I've always liked that neighborhood because it was peaceful, no traffic. But that night, the streets were empty. When I got to his house, something immediately felt off. Trevor's room was ransacked, like someone had been searching for something. The curtains were open, and the window was wide open. I looked out the window and saw nothing but darkness. A chill ran through me, and that's when I heard a noise from the hallway. It wasn't a normal noise. It sounded like a whisper, but coming from deep inside the house near the back door. I walked over there, and when I opened it, I saw something I'll never forget. It was him. Trevor was standing at the end of the hallway, staring at me. But what terrified me the most was his expression. It wasn't the Trevor I knew. He looked scared, but also empty, like he wasn't really there. I called his name, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, like he was waiting for something. At that moment, an eerie feeling overtook me. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just Trevor's behavior. I could feel something, stronger, like the very air was heavy, like the atmosphere was thick with a presence that shouldn't be there. I looked to the side, and that's when I saw it. No, it wasn't Trevor standing there. It was something else. It was tall, very tall, Its long arms seemed to stretch out to the side, like it was trying to move without really moving. It had no face. Nothing, absolutely nothing, where the face should have been. I don't know how, but I knew it was her, the figure Trevor had been describing. At that moment, fear froze me. My body didn't want to move, like I was paralyzed by sheer terror. The figure seemed to float in the air, and the worst part was that it seemed to be getting closer to Trevor. I couldn't hear anything anymore, just the sound of my breathing and the chill running down my spine. I ran to Trevor, shouting his name, but he was still motionless. It was like he was being taken away or possessed. What I didn't know was that, in that moment, Trevor simply disappeared, vanished. When I looked back to see the figure, it was no longer there. Nothing. Just emptiness. I went to the police, but no one believed me. They said it was a case of disappearance, but soon they started implying that Trevor had run away. I knew that wasn't it. Something was happening there, something beyond explanation. I searched for weeks. I looked everywhere. But I never saw Trevor again. The only thing left was the silence, and the feeling that whatever that thing was, it was still out there, watching, waiting. I researched it online, looked for any record of faceless figures, of Slender Man, but all I found were legends and senseless stories. But I know what I saw, I know what happened. And to this day, 2 years later, I feel like she's still watching me. Like somehow she's waiting for the right moment to come back. I don't know what happened to Trevor. I don't know what that thing was. But one thing's for sure. I never looked at the darkness the same way again. I know something exists there, something we can't see, but it can reach us when we least expect it. And I'm sure it wasn't the last time that thing appeared. I just hope that next time I'm not the next to disappear. My name is Lucas Sawyer. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a small town in Wisconsin, USA. What I'm about to tell you happened when I was only 8 years old, but to this day, reliving this story sends chills down my spine. I know many will find it strange, but what happened to me and my family was real, and none of it has a logical explanation. It was an autumn afternoon, and my mom, who's always been super protective, was busy in the kitchen preparing dinner. I was in my room, playing video games, while my older brother Tom was outside in the yard. My little sister Emma, who was just 4 years old at the time, was playing in the living room, which seemed completely normal. She had that vivid imagination that most kids that age have. But what happened next was something I'll never forget. It was when Emma started talking to herself. At first, I didn't pay attention, but my mom, who was in the kitchen, noticed and went to check on her. My sister was saying she was talking to the skinny man. Of course, at first, my mom thought it was just another imaginary friend, a phase she would grow out of, but soon enough, things started getting weird. Emma kept pointing to the corner of the room, saying the skinny man was over there, and when we asked her for more details, she described him with an eerie calmness. "He's tall, skinny, with no face," she said, "and he's watching me." I still remember the way my mom looked at her. The kind of look you give when you think the kid is just making things up, but then something about Emma's description caught our attention. It wasn't just any imaginary friend. It was the description of something that, in my mind, I had never heard of. A creature that didn't fit into any fairy tale or toy I'd seen. She was talking about Slender Man, the character I'd only heard of in creepy stories. In the following days, the situation worsened. Emma refused to sleep alone, saying that the skinny man was in her room. No matter how much we tried to reassure her, she insisted he was there, always watching. I began to notice that every day she seemed more tired, more terrified. And the worst part was that on several occasions, she said the skinny man had told her things. I and Tom, who never really believed in these kinds of things, started to worry. But at that point, nothing made sense. The house started to feel strange. I can't explain it well, but at night the lights would flicker, and sometimes we'd hear strange sounds coming from the hallway. At first, I thought it was just a problem with the wiring, but the feeling of unease was undeniable. I couldn't walk around the house anymore without feeling like someone was watching me. A sense of cold, a shiver, seemed to hang in the air, like the very atmosphere was heavy. One night, the terror became real. I was in my room trying to sleep when I heard the door to my room creak open slowly. I lay there, frozen, trying not to make a sound, and then I heard a quiet voice, almost a whisper. Lucas. It was Emma. She was standing in the hallway as if she was waiting for something. I didn't know what to do. Those words. I knew something was wrong. I got up, went to her and asked what she was doing out there. She just pointed to the end of the hall. He's there, she said. That night was the beginning of my nightmare. I couldn't sleep, and when I went back to my room, the light started flickering again. I watched, frozen with fear, until it went completely out. In the dark, I heard a noise coming from the other side of the house, like someone dragging their feet. I couldn't bring myself to leave the room, so I stayed there, locked in, trying to understand what was happening. The next day, my mom decided to get help. She went to the local church to talk to the priest, but he didn't seem to know what to do. When he came to our house, he looked at Emma and in a serious tone asked if she was still seeing the skinny man. Emma, with the same calmness, just nodded. The priest seemed unsettled, but didn't say much. He said that what was happening wasn't something simple and suggested we might need to seek help outside the city. So, my mom, desperate, started looking for answers. Apparently, the skinny man, or Slender Man as they call him, is a figure that appears to children and causes nightmares, leading them to do terrible things. We started researching more, but instead of finding solutions, our house seemed to grow darker. Emma seemed more distant, like she wasn't really there anymore. Fear took over all of us. We tried everything, prayers, spiritual consultations, even psychologists, but nothing seemed to work. Things got worse to the point where we started finding strange marks on the walls and furniture, as if something had tried to communicate or left a message. I don't know what it was, but we felt the presence of something there, watching, waiting. The situation reached a point where we started thinking about moving, but before we made any decision, something happened. Suddenly, everything stopped. Emma woke up the next morning and seemed normal. She no longer talked about the skinny man, no longer pointed to corners of the house. Nothing. The lights stopped flickering and the strange sounds ceased. But the strangest thing of all was that when we tried to talk to Emma about what had happened, she didn't remember anything. She didn't know who the skinny man was or what we were talking about. And here I am, trying to understand what happened. I can't explain it to this day. The feeling that something is still there, still watching, haunts me. When I look at Emma, who's grown up and has her own kids now, I wonder if she still remembers anything from that time. But the strangest thing is that, even after all this, the feeling has never completely gone away. I know many will think this was just a kid's phase, a made-up story. But my family and I know that something very strange happened, and to this day, we have no explanation. And honestly, I hope we never go through it again. My name is Patrick. I am 35 years old, and I live in a small town called Greenwood in the state of Washington. Today, I decided to write about something that happened to me about 7 years ago, but that still gives me chills to this day. I know a lot of people here share stories that are, for the most part, hard to believe, but what I experienced was real, and there's no logical explanation for it. It was an autumn afternoon, around 5 p.m, when the sun was starting to hide behind the trees, and the sky took on that characteristic orange hue. I was heading home from work, one of the last walks before night fell, since I lived in a more remote area near the forests. My route passed through a small stretch of woods that lay between the town centre and my house, and even though I had always avoided that place during the night, that day I felt more relaxed than usual. The weather was milder, and the fresh air seemed to calm my tired mind. As I walked, I noticed something strange at the edge of the forest. It wasn't a sound or a clear vision, but a sort of sensation in the air, as if something was watching me. The problem was, when I looked to the sides, I didn't see anything. No figure, just the trees and dense vegetation. I thought it was just my imagination, but even so, I quickened my pace, trying to ignore that chill running down my spine. The place was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that seems to absorb every sound around. It was strange, almost oppressive. I passed through the area quickly, not looking too much to the sides, but something seemed to call me back, as if an invisible force tried to pull me toward that stretch of the forest. In the following days, more reports began to emerge from residents of the area talking about sightings of a tall, skeletal figure in the forests. At first, I thought it was just a rumor, but then I started hearing more and more people talking about it, always describing the same thing. A strange figure with long limbs and a posture that seemed unusual, as if it were twisting or dragging itself. The descriptions varied, but the feeling that this thing was something out of the ordinary appeared in every story. I remember hearing an older man say he felt the chill of death when he saw it, and that never left my mind. That sensation of something being wrong, something that shouldn't be there. At first, the authorities thought it was just an exaggeration, and the population started to think it was either a prank or the story of some drunk person lost in the woods. But patrols began to increase in the area, and an official investigation began. However, nothing concrete was found. No evidence that could prove that something was really happening. The patrols said that, no matter how hard they tried, they could never find anything strange or unusual. But I knew something was wrong. In several conversations with friends, they also expressed that same uneasy feeling. It was like everyone was waiting for something, but no one could pinpoint what exactly it was. It was a fear without form, but tangible. Then one night I had to pass through that same stretch of forest to visit a friend. It was already late, around midnight, and the environment was silent, as if the whole world had stopped. I felt that same strange sensation in the air, a growing unease, as if something was waiting to make me feel fear. What I didn't expect was what I saw. In the middle of the road, about 50 meters away from where I was, I saw a tall figure. It was standing between the trees, but I could make out the contours. The figure didn't seem human, but it wasn't completely unrecognizable either. It was standing still, motionless, with its arms stretched down by its sides. The posture was completely wrong, as if the joints weren't working properly. I couldn't see the face, but the long limbs and the strange shadows created a sense of something completely out of place. The most terrifying thing was how it seemed to blend into the surrounding vegetation. It didn't seem to move, but at the same time, it seemed like it was part of the forest itself, in some distorted way, as if it wasn't really a creature, but more like a manifestation. My heart raced. Fear took over me, but I couldn't move. For what felt like minutes, but was probably just a few seconds, I stood there staring at that thing. Then, after a while, or maybe it was just the blink of an eye, the figure simply vanished between the trees. There was no sound, no other sign that it had moved, as if it had dissolved into the darkness. I ran to my friend's house as if there were no tomorrow, without looking back. I knew something was there, but I didn't know what it was. The next morning, I tried to tell people what I had seen, but no one seemed to believe me. Some said I must have been a victim of my imagination. Others thought maybe it was just a shadow created by the weak light from the street lamps. But I knew what I had seen, and I wasn't crazy. Not after all the other people had also reported the same thing. The patrols continued, but without success. After that, I never passed through that path again, and the stories about the skeletal figure only grew. Some people began to compare what I saw with old urban legends, but nothing made sense. No one found anything, and the sensation of being watched never completely disappeared. The worst part was that, over the months, some residents began reporting experiences similar to mine, always at night, and always with the same description. From time to time, the topic would resurface, as if the town could never fully shake off that fear. Some people started changing their routines. Others avoided the forest at night, and others still grouped together to try to uncover what was happening, but everything seemed futile. The mystery was never solved. Patrols increased, but nothing else was found. No more sightings, and the thing just stopped. I never saw anything again, but that sensation that something was there, waiting, never left me. As if it was still lurking, ready to appear at any moment. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know if it's still out there or if it just disappeared. I don't know if it came from somewhere much older or if it was created by something no one can understand. And honestly, I hope I never find out. The worst part is knowing that, even though the patrols stopped and the investigation ceased, the fear was never truly gone. And the worst part, no one seems to remember anymore. For everyone, it's just another legend from a small town, but for me, it's a living memory, something I can't erase from my mind. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like to support the community. And if you're not subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you next time.